Welcome back to the Voices of Women Summit, where in honor of International Women's Day 2023, we are raising the voices of hundreds of women so that their messages can be heard. Your host for this session is Jessica Koch. Jessica is a sales and marketing expert. She is the creator of a virtual assistant membership program, helping you get everything done, and host of Profound Professionals video podcast and interview series. She has another amazing guest coming right up. Take it away, Jessica.
Hello, everybody. How exciting for us to be celebrating together International Women's Day and to have our beautiful and brilliant guest, Jami Carlacio. What a beautiful name, Carlacio. It's just fun to say, Carlacio. And her talk title today,
Carlacio. It's very musical.
It's very, is it Italian? Because it feels very Italian. Carlacio.
It's not German.
And she is going to share with us 3 communication strategies that every businesswoman needs to know. Tell us, Jami, why you're passionate about this topic.
Well, as a woman in business, one of the things that I've noticed is, and everybody, I need you to put in the chat, have you noticed there are any disparities between women and men at work? And what kind of disparities do you know about? So I want to hear, I want to see in the chat what you think are some of the problems or challenges between women and men. And the thing is, it's pay, right? It's treatment, it's promotion. So it's all of these things. And so since I have been a woman in the workforce and I have a PhD in rhetoric and communication, my whole life has been about speaking well and writing well and helping others to do that. And that's one of the chief ways that we are perceived and evaluated is through our talking, through our public speaking, through our writing. So as a woman, I wanted to be able to lift up other people's voices and help them to see how they can step into their power, because you might be the smartest person on the planet, but communicating that to others is a real skill and an art.
Well, and I would say, I think it's so surprising to me that it's still a challenge today for women in the workspace, whether you own your own company or you're working for a company, because I'm 50 and fabulous just recently. And I did start my career when I was in my very young 20s. And back then, the business place was a very challenging space for a woman to be, especially because I was working with, and my ideal customer was the CEO or CFO of a large major corporation or a large government entity. And I have to tell you, it was like, I'm not even exaggerating, I'm pretty sure it was close to 98% male space. Like, I almost never met with a woman CFO or CEO in all of the 20 some years that I had that career. Which I feel like is really sad and I think is changing. So share with us some of the communication strategies that you feel will help uplift and give women strength in the business world.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I've had the same experience. And just before I start, maybe just a quick anecdote about how women are perceived. A friend of mine is an engineer and has worked for a major aircraft manufacturing company. And when she first got her job as an engineer, her boss called her Barbie and expected her to do the coffee and all of the secretarial work. And she was like, I'm not a secretary and I don't do coffee, I'm an engineer. So she really had to fight just to be respected. And that was when she entered the workforce. I think it's a little different now, but women are still facing a lot of barriers. So that's why I came up with this. I actually developed it as a course too, and I'm going to be actually teaching it live at some point. But the thing is, there are 3 main things that women need to know. One of them is how to listen. And I have a whole paradigm on that, and it's called clarity. And I'll explain that in a second. The second piece is how to talk, or what men and women do differently when they're speaking or when they're engaging in relationships at work, whether it's in a meeting or in a team or whatever. And then the third one is, what are the nonverbal gestures that make a difference in how we are perceived? And you're nodding, and I'm just going to tell you to hold that, because nodding is a huge, huge thing, and women do a lot more nodding than men do. So now I'll just briefly go over some of the things that I just said I would talk about. So the very first thing is to get the right piece of paper in front of me. So the gender pay gap, believe it or not, the gender pay gap is still as big as it was 20 years ago. If you add up all of the jobs, part-time and full-time, and aggregate them across women and men in the comparable fields, women are still making 82 cents to the dollar that men make. And if you disaggregate that data and you look at just younger women entering the workforce, say from ages 25 to 34, they're making 92 cents on the dollar. So things have improved, but as you just pointed out, Jessica, with your age, that's a problem for people like us who are over 34. So we're all in the workforce. We've been doing this for a long time. We have a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience, and maybe we've even had a few different jobs, but we're still facing a lot of discrimination. And so I say all that as a background because when women do things that women do, our brains are different, for crying out loud, right? Our brains are wired differently for men's. That's why we're women and they're men. So we have a larger language center, an emotional center. So when women have, say, oh, they're about their feelings, yes, we are. And generally speaking, that's a good thing until somebody says it's not a good thing. So the other thing that is dogging women still is the glass ceiling, or some people call it the sticky floor. So in other words, women aren't promoted as often or as high up as men. And so that becomes a problem. And it's especially a problem for non-binary people, people of color, people of different nationalities or ethnicities, because of the discrimination that is inherent in the way we treat people. So a woman who is a person of color or is non-binary is starting so far back from the starting line, it's not even funny. So promotions are difficult. And part of it is women don't negotiate the same way men do for salary. So if you're at your first job and you're negotiating a salary, you're going to negotiate the higher up you go, the more money you're going to make. Men are more willing to negotiate up for their first salary than women are. So if women are starting with less pay, when they move on to their next job, chances are that next job's going to be lower pay than it would be for the person who negotiated for a higher salary to begin with. So there's that. There's the age factor, again, race and ethnicity. But the other thing is motherhood. So motherhood is also a challenge that women face. And women often take time off from the workforce to raise the kids. They're the one that has to take the half day off to take the kid to the doctor or stay home when they're sick. So women are penalized for the very things that they do that they don't even get paid for. So that's all unpaid labor. So those are some of the challenges that women have to overcome. In other words, we have a lot bigger obstacles, but all is not lost because women are smart and bright and intelligent. And that's why we're here today. We're celebrating Women's Day. We're celebrating a whole month of women. So the first thing that I want to talk about then is how to listen, how to be a good listener, because good listeners make good leaders. Or maybe I should say it the other way, good leaders are good listeners. So I've developed a whole paradigm on it. And the first, it's called clarity. And my company is Clarity Communications. C stands for be curious. There's nothing worse than talking to someone who clearly just wants to get a word in about his or her thing, or doesn't want to listen, but just wants to give you what they think. So instead of anticipating or projecting what someone is going to say, just suspend your judgment and clear your mind of your expectations and avoid planning your next move, because that detracts from you to really hear what the other person is saying. So the first thing is be curious. The second one is to listen actively and attentively. And so that means using words like and oh, just so that the person knows you're actually hearing them, and of course, making the appropriate sounds or responses to whatever they're telling you. So for example, you could say, so you just said X, Y, and Z. Did I have that right? And that person could say, yes, that's exactly what I was talking about. Or they could say, no, that's not exactly right. And I would say, okay, could you help me understand that? Could you say it another way? So you clearly are engaged in the conversation or in the interaction. A is for acknowledge and validate. So everybody wants to be seen and heard. We all do. We want validation. Imagine you sharing a great idea in a meeting and you get crickets. Nobody likes crickets unless you're a snake and you eat crickets. But you probably wonder, did I make sense? Did anyone even hear me? Was my idea that bad that nobody wanted to say anything to me? If you are listening to this right now, put in the chat whether or not you feel like people don't listen to you all the time, or you wish people would listen better to you, or you feel like you are a good listener and you wish other people would be like that too. I'd like to hear that. So acknowledge and validate. And the other thing is, I call it the 90-10 rule. So let's say you're in a team meeting and everybody's throwing ideas out, and one person throws out an idea that is just so bad. You don't say, wow, glad you came up with that one, Charlie. That was just great. You say, oh, wow, okay. So maybe in your head, you're thinking, this is the worst idea on the planet. This will never fly. But you say, hey, what I like about your idea is that you said this, and that means you're thinking outside the box. Okay, maybe you didn't like 90% of the idea, but leave that alone. And then say, and what I would add to that, and then you add to it. So in other words, the person feels validated and acknowledged and valued, and you have just added a layer onto a little piece of the idea that was good. The third one is clarity, R, respond, don't react. Now, this is almost impossible. A lot of times when we're triggered, we just automatically react. And the best way to do it is to respond. Take a breath if something triggers you and respond. So pause, read the situation, and then respond. And taking a breath is perfectly okay. Nobody else is going to notice it but you, that you needed to take a second. The I is impact versus intent. There's nothing more frustrating, I think, than when you felt like somebody dismissed you or said something unkind, or you experienced a microaggression and they said, I didn't mean it that way. Wow, you're just taking that all wrong. And I only had good intentions. Well, your intentions are, what paves the road to hell. And guess what? It's the impact. How did that land? Maybe I don't even have a clue of what I said that really hurt you or struck a chord. Or maybe if this is a situation in which there is a difference in racial identity, a white person may have said something that he or she didn't even really know that they were doing, and it landed in a way that was really harmful. The best thing to do is say, wow, I am so sorry, and thank you for pointing that out. I'm going to do better next time. So you acknowledge the impact. You don't sit there and talk about all your great intentions. Makes a huge difference. And T, be truthful. If you've done something that is an occasioned a pardon, then please own up to it. Be truthful. Say, yeah, I did that. You're right. People who do that are respected so much more than people who don't. And typically in a workplace, males are less likely to apologize than women. So it is important to be truthful. The last part of it is yes, clarity. Why? Say yes to open communication. In other words, be the person who's open to all the ideas and will hear complaints with compassion and empathy, and will collaborate with you to find solutions. Is this resonating with anyone? I'd like to hear in the chat if you are hearing any of this and if it makes any sense to you. So the second part is words matter. Words are so important. I don't know if anyone in here is familiar with the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, but he relies on Toltec wisdom. And the very first agreement is be impeccable with your word. So what that means isn't simply keep your promises, do what's right. It means every thought that comes out of your head, every word that comes out of your mouth needs to come from a genuine place of love and warmth and kindness and empathy. Now, that isn't to say it's easy, because it's not, especially when we're triggered or, we have to interact with somebody that we find difficult. But the idea is we want to always be thinking in the direction of love and truth. So what does this mean? What you're thinking in your head is oftentimes what comes out of your mouth, your sentences, your phrases, what you write. If you've ever been on the receiving end of a nasty email or a nasty text message, then you know what it feels like to say, whoa, and sometimes I wonder, I've been on the receiving end of those, and I wonder, what if we were face to face? Would they say that to me face to face? And I often wonder, because a lot of times people hide behind the screen, or they hide, they text a message, and it's still harmful, but they didn't even give you the opportunity to respond in person. So be impeccable with your word. So the other thing is, you create a different self-image of yourself. So when you value your word and you speak from a place of love and empathy, you put off that kind of energy. If you don't value your word, or you're not accountable, or you overpromise and underdeliver, then your word isn't going to be that good. The other part of being impeccable with your word is sometimes knowing when to stay silent, which is, oftentimes, people want to talk, they want to hear themselves. And so sometimes silence is even better. And that goes back to the listening paradigm. Sometimes it's better just to listen and hear and absorb, and not necessarily think about what you need to say, because maybe there isn't. One way of thinking about this is, when something is going on, does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said now? So if it doesn't need to be said, you can forget the other two. Maybe it needs to be said, but are you the one that needs to say it? And does it have to be said right now? And your fears come out when you talk. So we're always, people are afraid for a lot of different reasons. We all deal with all kinds of fears. But if you live in fear of speaking your truth or being able to really express yourself, then you're not being impeccable with your word. I'm going to move on now to how women can succeed. In other words, what are some of the things that women do that sabotage their success? And it isn't by doing anything wrong. It's just because they're different style of communicators. So when it comes to taking credit for stuff, women will oftentimes use we, where men will use I. So men look like they're more successful because they're more apt to take the I did this, and women are more apt to say, we did this. And so they're more collective. Women are collaborative and collective and relational. And that's just part of, again, how our brains are wired. So what's really important is thinking about, if you did something, if you accomplished something, you've got to take credit for it so that people will know, oh, she's worth promoting. She did this X, Y, and Z thing. Because what happens is, if managers don't see women taking credit for things, or they don't perceive the women as confident, they won't even promote them. One CEO said that he makes decisions within about 10 seconds. And if he doesn't notice that they have any self-confidence, he doesn't promote them. He'll promote somebody else. So that's a really telling thing. So take the credit where it is due. And the next one is whether you're task oriented or relationship oriented. This is especially true in different cultures. Some cultures are more apt to focus on relationship building and then get the task done. And some are focused on get the task done, especially Americans, and will build the relationship in the process. But because women are relational, they tend to emphasize more on developing that relationship so that they can get the task done. Confidence and boasting. So it's not boasting to say when you did something great, unless you're just doing it for self-serving purposes. But women typically don't like to boast. But when boys and girls are socialized, boys are rewarded for boasting. They're rewarded with power. Women are not rewarded for that. And so we've been taught, oh, don't say it, don't tout your own horn. But I'm telling you now that you have to start touting your own horn. That's what's going to matter. Now, two biggies. One is asking questions. How many of you here ask questions? I'm a question asker. I'm always the one with my hand up. Who has questions? Oh, I do. Nobody will raise their hand. I've always got a question. Well, it turns out, and this is huge. This is so huge. Men don't like to ask questions because it makes them feel like they don't know something, or they're going to be perceived as not knowing something. And so if that's how men are thinking, that's how they think about women. So if women are asking questions, they think, well, she must not know very much. She's got all these questions. Whereas in our minds, we're like, I want to learn that. That's cool. I want to learn more. Can I ask this question? And so women are all about learning and asking. And again, relationship. Men are like, I'm not going to ask a question. That's going to make me look dumb. So women have to really think about where I am and what situation am I in? What kind of meeting is this? When is the time to ask questions and when not, because of the way that I am perceived. So you're never doing anything wrong by asking a question, ever, ever, ever. But look at how other people perceive you. And that may be part of the reason why you're not getting promoted or something. And I did a workshop at an engineering firm where the women were the minority and there were fewer women in management and executive positions. And they were really, really angry at the work culture. And that's why we came in to do the workshop. We did a workshop on gendered communication. And everyone's jaw dropped when we talked about questioning because nobody ever thought of it that way. Nobody. And so the women were like, oh, because they didn't receive a lot of the respect from their male counterparts. And the other one is, and I said I would talk to you about this again, Jessica, nodding. Women nod and affirm, and, we're showing that we're actively listening. Men don't do a lot of nodding. So when we're nodding, it might look like, yeah, I agree with you. When you're just saying, yeah, I'm listening, I'm engaging with you. You may not have a single point of agreement with anything the other person said, but you're nodding because you're trying to be in relationship with that person. So nodding and question asking are the two main things that cause different perceptions of women and men. So women tend to be seen as more subordinate if they ask questions and if they nod. So that's a fun fact, right? I don't know how fun it is.
Wow.
But it's a fact.
You've shared a lot with us. Are we wrapping to the end of your amazing information?
Yeah, I wanted to say another thing. Now, how many of you apologize when you bump into somebody, or apologize when you're in the grocery store and you have to squeeze by somebody in the aisle, or whatever reason? Let's say you're getting into your car and the person in the car next to you is getting out. Well, women will say, I'm sorry, but you haven't done anything wrong. So women are constantly apologizing as a courtesy. It's kind of like a cultural courtesy, but men don't apologize like women do. So women are always seen as, like, she must have done something wrong. She's apologizing. And my favorite anecdote is a man and a woman are having a meeting in her office. He leaves his keys on the desk. He leaves and he comes back and he says, oh, I left my keys here. And she says, oh, here they are. Sorry. Well, she's not sorry, but it looks like somehow or other she scooped up the keys and kept them. So apologies, nodding, and what did I say? Apologies, nodding, and
question asking.
Thank you, question asking. So there's
I was listening.
That's good. Right. So, and then I'll just very quickly on the nonverbal gestures, facial expressions are really important. You want to smile when you're talking to people. And if you need to know what you look like, just record yourself, do a photo booth, or a Zoom cast or something to see what you look like when you're talking to people. One of the most important things that I see is people don't know how to make eye contact, and it's worse in the Zoom world. So I'm staring right at my camera right now, and I'm imagining all of you looking at me, but I actually don't look particularly at anyone on the screen, because I want people to know that I'm actually looking at them. And if I'm looking down or looking over, or my screen's over there, you're going to wonder where my attention is. So eye contact is huge. I would say that's the number one thing. And the other thing is, where do you put your hands? If they're in front of you, you're trying to make yourself smaller. If they're in back of you like this, you're trying to make yourself bigger. If you have a briefcase and you stick it in front of yourself when you're having a conversation, you're blocking. You're saying, I don't want to get too close to you. I'm uncomfortable. Step away. So just a few things like that are also important. We all talk with our hands, but it's how we talk with our hands. Are our fists clenched? Are they open? So open hands, eye contact, and stance. And unless you are a really angry mother at your teenage son who just came home late and broke his curfew, don't put your hands on your hips. I'll leave it at that.
That is great advice. I want to thank everyone who has joined us and everyone who is listening. This is such a special day for women all over the globe. And our gift from Jami today is that she shared this brilliant and amazing information with us. But I will encourage you to go ahead and get your VIP, because there are some wonderful gifts to download, both standard gifts with the standard ticket, as well as more advanced gifts with the VIP, some great trainings and things. Up next, we have Kim Speed, how to successfully transition from employee to entrepreneur. I would say there are so many things I loved about your talk. I had the honor of doing an art of negotiation class for the leadership for one of the largest power providers in the world, and is a very powerful tool in using in negotiation. And as you were sharing with us in communication and talked about acknowledging something that someone had said, even when you don't necessarily agree with the entire concept or idea, and then adding "and" to it to bring value, super brilliant advice, ladies. So please get your VIP ticket so that you can watch Jami again and really take some notes and think about how you're communicating. I would also say I recently, not too long ago, watched the Helen Reddy I Am Woman documentary, and I was shocked to learn, and I could be wrong about this, but that the law still has not been changed so that women do actually by law have the right to the same and equal pay for equal positions and jobs. So I think that's still in the works. I don't know. Maybe you guys can hone in on it, or maybe Jami knows. But before we say goodbye, we do want to let her have one last final word of wisdom, and then we will head out, because there are so many more wonderful talks to enjoy today, and I hope you're enjoying them too, Jami.
Yeah, so I would say step into your power. First of all, know that you have power, know that you're beautiful and lovable and smart, and then step into that, and don't let anybody tell you differently.
Thank you, Jami. Take us out, Wax.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing session of the Voices of Women Summit, where our mission is to raise the voices of hundreds of women so their messages can be heard. For recordings of all sessions, plus an amazing VIP gift bundle, upgrade to VIP now. If you have any questions or problems during the summit, email our support team at support@voicesofwomensummit.com. Stay tuned. We have another fantastic speaker coming right up.
Sorry, we have to